Hey everybody, welcome to the Going Analog podcast, the show where board game industry guests bring their own topics and games to discuss. I'm your host, Christina, and we're happy to welcome writer and performer Tiffany Leigh as our guest today. Tiffany's written board game articles for Meeple Mountain, Goonhammer, and their Turn Order, the board game and TTRPG side of Goonhammer, and even for the print magazine Senate, which is like a fantastic publication. She focuses on how games make us feel, so we're excited to dig into the gaming experience with her today. So welcome to our show, Tiffany. Hi.
Thanks for having me. Happy Pride Month.
Yes.
As we're recording. We're at the tail end of Pride Month.
Yes. Well,
I have a little flag. Here's the flag.
When does Pride Month
Wave that
end?
across.
Is it all of June?
Yeah.
It's all, Pride Month's all of June.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Today's the big parade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So our podcast will come out
A little bit later.
right at the beginning of July. So
But we'll want to...
Okay, cool. Spoiler.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
We'll want to relive Pride when this comes out.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Okay.
And so we're excited to talk to you today. What topic do you have for us today?
So kind of goes along with the way I think and write about games, which is how they make me feel. And I think an aspect of games that I'm seeing more and more of is the toy factor and how that's defined. I don't think I want to have a hard definition of what it is, but just kind of, talk about some games that have introduced the toy factor and even historically kind of growing up and how I don't think it's considered childish anymore. Games that were toys instead of games that have a toy factor, I think is a difference. And I do think there's a lot of really good games that are coming out now that lean into that aspect of it for just casual gamers, but also hobby gamers.
Yeah.
So I just had some ideas for that.
Awesome. I'm excited to talk about that. We love touching things. I mean, it's a part of our our gaming experience, right?
Yeah.
We're playing tabletop games. Shu's here with me too, of course, as usual. Hi, Shu.
Hello.
He was just lamenting the other day when he went 3 days without playing board games, but we're back on now.
But then we just looked at our calendar and we're like, oh, we don't have anything booked for this next week, so we need to get on that.
You're like fiending. Do you like set alarms like on your phone, like when people remind themselves to drink water? Does it remind you to play games?
I think it's just a natural internal something that's like telling me like something is there's something wrong, something missing. Like, oh, I haven't played board games in a while. But we've been traveling and that's part of the reason. And so now that we're back and settled in, it's time to get more on the calendar, I think.
That's great.
We always like to dive into our game picks to get to know each other a little bit more. So we
didn't tell our audience our topic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they'll find out eventually. Okay, what's our topic?
Well, so in talking to Tiffany before the show, we found out that Tiffany's a big movie buff. Like how did you describe? You described it like you're almost like a Clerks.
Yeah, I mean, I actually worked as a video store clerk in like 94 when Tarantino and Kevin Smith and all those people's careers launched. So it was like peak video store. And I worked in film and television production for about a dozen years after that. So movies have been kind of a part of my career, a previous career.
Right. So that got us thinking like, oh, let's talk about there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of influence on board games from the movie industry. So I want to talk about games for movie lovers, basically, but that are not licensed for IP. So we're not like, hey, play this Star Wars game or play this Dune game. So these are games that are clearly have some influence either by specific movies or genre movies. And then what are some of our recommendations there?
Excited to hear about that, and we are going to talk about the games we picked today too. So we each picked a game to discuss, to highlight, things like that. It could be a recent play or just a classic. So what is our game that we wanted to talk about today, Shu?
Our game is Galactic Renaissance. So I keep wanting to call it Galactic Civilization, which is a video game. Galactic Renaissance. So these were this game is by the makers of another really famous game called Inish. I believe I'm pronouncing it right. INIS.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I've been told it's pronounced Inish. It's a Celtic word or something. But so Galactic Renaissance, the idea here is everyone is a different faction, an alien faction of some sort. And then we're all kind of like in this universe, we're like trying to spread our influence onto different planets that we're discovering. So we're sending emissaries there. We're building sort of different institutes at these places. And we're just basically trying to spread our culture across the world. But the gameplay is very unique. So basically everyone has the same 7 cards, their initial 7 cards to start with. And then all of the actions in the game are driven by these cards. So this card might be to like, hey, move some emissaries from your supply to your home planet, or make them travel to other planets, or take away other emissaries, or build an institute. And so you're adding influence. And ultimately, if you really simplify it, it's an area control game.
Yeah.
So all these different planets, you're trying to have more influence there than other places. But you're putting all these pieces out everywhere. And then those cards that you get, when you activate them, you might only draw to play one or two of them. Then you put them back to the bottom of your deck, and you almost never shuffle your deck unless an action allows you to. So you're cycling these actions in a specific order and kind of keep track of like, okay, I just played the card that's going to let me score a lot of the objectives, but that's not going to come up for another 3-4 rounds until that comes up again. So you have to time everything to this cadence, which is really unique. But it's also, you can recruit a few extra cards to put into your deck, so then you could grow more powers. But ultimately, everyone's doing kind of the same thing. They're just really limited by what's currently in their hand. So it's sort of like Inish that does that way. The way they did it in that game was everyone drafted the same set of cards. So you had everyone knew what was possible in the game. It just depended on when you got the cards and when you drafted it. So it has a similar vibe of like, you're not drafting cards, you have your own deck, but you can only do what the cards are that are currently in your hand. So I will say in the beginning, it was hard to learn because I had to read the instruction manual twice. This is my main criticism of the game. I had to read the instruction manual twice. And then even as I was playing, I'm like, I warned the table. I'm like, the first time we played it, I'm like, I'm not sure you're going to learn this game with me. I don't have full confidence I understand everything about this game. There's some things that are like, there's literally pieces in a game, like these foundation buildings that the rule book doesn't address at all. They just tell you how to set it up. You don't know what they do. You don't know what they do because all the actions come in the cards. The card, as you play the games and you see, oh, this card lets you put out foundations, and then you get to draw more cards if you're in places with foundations. You wouldn't know that from reading the book. So it's a really strange learning curve. And then everyone at the table, our first time playing it, was learning it with us at the same time. And then about maybe an hour in, it was like, okay, now it's starting to click. So I will warn people, like it's a longer game. The first game took a long time to play because we're learning. I had to look up a lot of things online to find like, well, does this mean this? When we run out of foundations, what do we do? In this situation, what do we do? So there's a lot of fringe cases that the instruction book also doesn't address. But once you kind of get past that and you're like, okay, I got this now. And then you start playing it, then it's like, okay, it runs really smoothly. It's really competitive. It's like you got to make a lot of smart decisions because another really cool thing about the game is once you reach 20 points to win, you have to hit 30. But if you can't do that in one round, in one turn, you back your score back to 20. It resets back to 20. So it's almost like you're on a slippery slope. So the game's forcing you to do a 10-point plus move to finish the game, which is I thought was weird at first, but then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool because everyone's kind of catching up and everyone's planning. It's like, how do I not just inch towards victory, but how do I make a big move to finish the game in one shot? So overall, I thought it was like really neat. It's like very different vibe from a lot of these area control games. I think you said, Christina, initially it wasn't very intuitive.
No.
Because it wasn't like a map. Different planets had different portals that only if you had the correct portals can they connect to each other. So it wasn't like at a glance you could see what planets are next to each other or what planets are travelable from one to the other. But once you kind of get used to that, it's like, I really like this game. The card play is just so different. It's so strategic. Every move felt super important. You hated when you had a suboptimal turn and things like that. But I really enjoyed it. What did you think?
I'm okay on it, I think, because area control is not my favorite in general. But it had some interesting parts to it. I do feel like for future teaches, you need to like actually like, even if you're reading the rule book, you should be reading the cards too, so that you can understand when people ask you, what is this for? Because like, she didn't know, which I don't blame him for, because literally the rule book does not say, right? But like as a teacher, I would want to like read all of the cards, go over them, and I think people would have a much better idea of like what they're trying to do in the beginning. We were all just sort of like groping around in the dark in the beginning. So we're like, I don't know, I'm going to play this card. I don't know how this goes. But I think there are very strategic decisions. So without knowing what they're for, it can feel very weird in the beginning. There's these little tiny icons at the bottom that let you continue playing cards too. And I wish that the UI would have been a little bit more in calling attention to that fact, because it's crucial when you want to like link turns, and to not know that that's an important part of it in the beginning can be disruptive, I think. And I think for me, I was literally 1 point away from winning. So I was sitting back. I needed 12 points to finish the game, and I could only get 11 on this turn when I knew that my friend was probably going to get it next time. So for me, that was just sort of sad. Because I was like, so close, so close. So it was cool that I could like count it and see that I was almost there. But some people might not like that sort of mathy element where you do have to set up for that last turn. If you can't hit that final 10, 11, 12 points, then you need to find some other alternate way to block other people instead. And that can sort of switch things up. So the more you play it, I think the more interesting this game becomes. I would definitely try it again for sure, and try to like dig into it a little bit more. There's a lot there, but it is sort of very weird in the beginning, I think.
Yeah. Have you played? You sort of look like you knew Inish, Tiffany.
I have Inish, and I played it a couple times when we first got it, and it's on the shelf. And every time we do a call or a giveaway, it's on the bubble, but I just can't quit it. So I'm like, I'm going to hang on to it because I just remember really enjoying it. And I forgot that this game came out. And so when you mentioned it, I was like, I haven't heard of this game. As soon as you said it was from the people who made Inish. And I'm kind of glad it wasn't just we changed the theme to space.
Yeah. It's very different.
So it sounded like it has maybe some basic elements like, you're all sort of fighting over stuff, and there's a bit of, there's card actions, but other than that, like I was nervous it was going to be like, there's a game called Terra Mystica. I don't know if you know that game. And it's, it's kind of a deep thinky game in terms of resource management and area control. And the theme is, fantasy, creatures, like dwarves and trolls and you're all fighting on the same board. And then I think they reskinned it and made it slightly easier to kind of enter.
But
and
uglier.
they called it Gaia Project,
yes,
right?
But uglier.
And so when you said this, I was like, oh no, I hope they didn't Gaia Project Inish, but I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, it has that same vibe of like, what card do I want to do? And this card's going to change everything. It's going to do everyone. There's a lot of powers that are like, when people are like, I'm going to play this card, it's going to let me do this, and people are like, oh, that feels so overpowered. But everyone has access to the same card, mostly the same cards. Yeah. So it still has that kind of same vibe. But the part that Inish I think does better is like the map is, you can see what's adjacent right away. Like this one, after a while, we have planets all over the table, and then you have to like, okay, does this have the blue portal? That has a blue portal. That means these two planets are connected. So I guess it's sort of more for space theme. It makes more sense that planets are connected to multiple planets. They're not just physically adjacent to each other. But that's big. Like make it a little bit harder for you to kind of track what's going on. Not too bad. But it's still. I thought it was just such a neat game because it's so different and it's just it's highly strategic. So
I think the other game I was thinking of when you were describing it, especially the planetary, the galactic theme and everything, was there's a part of Beyond the Sun that. And so Beyond the Sun is the main board is basically a technology tree. So you're just all trying to move forward on that, taking actions. But then there's sort of a sideboard, and those are planets that you visit. And those are ones where you want area control of a planet so that you can colonize it basically. So you can take the cards that are on those planets. And there's a lot of fighting over who has the most units on a planet and moving around that system to get to planets before other people. And
that one's a lot more intuitive to see than this game is in terms of how things connect. But I love Beyond the Sun too. So good. It makes me want to play that again.
Awesome.
So that's Galactic Renaissance.
And what about your game, Tiffany?
My game is new-ish, but it came out in 2019, which was right before the pandemic descended upon us. So sometimes it feels old, but because it was another world. It's called the Taverns of Tiefenthal. And I really like this game. It came out in 2019. It's designed by Wolfgang Warsch, who had a few huge hits right before this came out.
Not a lot.
And I feel like this game's under the radar. Like, I think it's out there. It's always been readily available since it was released. Anybody I've ever talked to that has heard of it or have played it really likes it, but it's probably the game that I've played the most since it was released in terms of, I track what I've played, and I think that one's way up there in terms of plays. A lot of games I get one or two, and that I'm fortunate if I can even get one or two plays, and this one is one we return to. Plays a lot faster as well, and it's a really great 2-player game. And in it, you are all operating a tavern in the Tiefenthal region of Germany. It's like in the southwest of Germany. It's in a valley region, and you're kind of surrounded on either side by mountains. So, 4 seasons, but there are cold winters, and there's kind of really nice summers. And so it's just kind of like a string of taverns in this area, and you're trying to run the best one, make the most money. In the game, it's very intuitive. You actually have the board is a series of modules that you kind of connect together. So it's like an overhead view of your tavern. So there's the area where the customers sit, and there's a bar, and then there's some stations for like your where your bartender is, and there's a keg of beer nearby, and then there's a dishwashing station, and then there's a waitstaff station, and then there's several tables. And so during the game, every round, customers come in and sit down, and then you have to make money by serving them, and then you want to buy upgrades to your tavern, and you want to also attract more wealthy patrons because the customers are represented by cards. So I don't like when you say deck building, everybody immediately thinks of like Magic the Gathering and Dominion and these massive things. It's a deck building game, but it's micro. You don't have and you don't construct it in advance. You kind of construct it in the game as you play. And so each card is going to be something that comes into your tavern, whether it's staff or whether it's a customer. And every round you just draw from your deck, blind, and then they populate your tavern. And then and then every customer has a die value on it. And if you place a die on it, which is the second part of each round, you gain money. That's how you make money in this game. But there's 2 currencies in this game. And this is a game that kind of starts out where you say it's a deck builder, but it's almost like an improv exercise where you do yes and then you just keep adding to it. It's a deck builder, yes, and there's also dice drafting, yes, and there's also it also feels like a roll and write because of the combos that happen. But you need so the 2 currencies in the game is money, it's gold, and it's beer. Beer is how you get more customers into your deck. And once they're in your deck and they come into your tavern, they give you money. And money is how you buy more staff and upgrade your tavern. So all the pieces on the board that you kind of click together to make your overhead view of the tavern, if you upgrade them, you flip them over and they're better. Each little section it's a stronger action basically to take it, and you gain points for it. But it's expensive to do that. So long as the game goes on, ideally you want every section of your tavern to be upgraded, and you want customers that are not like 1s and 2 die faces, but
the
5s
big
and 6s.
spenders,
That's right. And it's always whatever their value is, that's what you get. So if it's a 4 die face, you get 4 gold if they come into your tavern, and you're able to place a dice on it. So that's kind of like the first part of the game is you flip cards in your deck and you populate your tavern, and you keep flipping them until the tables in your tavern are full, and each table takes a customer. If you flip over a staff member, you can just keep flipping cards. It's only the cutoff every round is 3 customers in the first round because you only have 3 tables. One of the upgrades you can buy are extra tables. You can make space for more tables in your tavern. So by the end of the game, if you've bought a lot of tables, that just extends how many cards you can flip in your deck. And there's definitely it kind of ramps up where by the end of the game, last round, you might be flipping over almost your entire deck because you have so much table, upgrades and all this other stuff. And all the upgrades mitigate the dice or make the actions better for the dice. So like the dishwasher, if you hire a dishwasher and that flips, you can pip your die up one up or one down. So it can change the die facing so you can actually use it somewhere in your tavern. The wait staff, each player color gets additional die of their own color. And if for every wait staff that's in your tavern in a given round, you get to roll those dice as well. Because generally you only are going to get 4 dice to allocate into your tavern through a dice drafting round. But if you have wait staff, you're going to get your own unique dice that nobody else gets to draft or share. So wait staff is useful. There's a brewer who shows up, and based on, if you roll 1s or 6s, the brewer gives you a beer, an extra beer. And again, you want beer and you want gold, and you want both equally. If you go all in one resource currency or the other, you're not going to do as well in the game.
Yeah.
And I think what's really cool about the game, I mean, it's very general how I'm describing it, because it really kind of gets into a deep dive. Some of the things about it that are really great. And again, this kind of goes more into why when I write reviews, it's mostly how I feel. Like there's so many things you do in this game that feel good when you're playing it. Kind of the way you were just discussing how about, I was about to, win, but I could only get to 11 points and it didn't feel great that I couldn't reach it and I knew it. One of the cool, and again, it's like kind of it's almost like little acts of kindness in this game that make it more fun to play. Like one of the things is when you acquire a new card, I got a new customer because I have, spent beer to get a new customer. When things go into your deck, they don't go into the discard. They go into the top of your deck, your draw deck, meaning anything you acquire in a round, you're going to see in the next round. And that feels good because you're acquiring things. You're like, oh, great. I know I'm going to have an extra table. I know I'm going to have a waitress. I know I'm going to have like this really spendy customer and I need to get 5s or 6s on the die. Like you can kind of pre-plan, but it feels good it's like instant gratification, which is awesome. And that's one thing. The other thing is like all the different there's all these little areas on the board. And there's a couple of separate boards. There's something called a monastery track. So one of the things on the in the tavern is you can put a die on this guy that's sitting at the bar, and he's somebody at the monastery. He's just coming in for a beer, and if you allocate a die to him, he moves your piece that's on the monastery track, and then when you get to certain places on that track, it unlocks bonuses. So you might get like a free waitress or a free bar back who gives you a free beer, or a dishwasher, all this stuff. So it kind of has, and again, Wolfgang Warsch, just to provide context, this game came out in 2019. In 2018, he had like the year of all years. He put out the game called The Mind.
Yes.
He put out Quacks of Quedlinburg, and those were just massive hits. And then he put
Wavelength in the past too. Before that,
then That's So Clever, Ganz Schön Clever, which if you have a phone, you can get like 4 versions of that because he's made like 4 different on your phone, and so like really addictive roll and write. And this kind of has some of the energy of some of those games. Instead of bag building, I don't want to interrupt. We do want to move on because we got a couple of topics to go. But I just want to add, we both are big fans of that game as well. It's like it plays really smoothly. It's thematically, it's really cool. I mean, sorry, I just gush about it because I played it so much and it's so fun. That's one. That was kind of easy because I've never gotten to talk about it. I've never written it up. So I was like, I'll just talk about it here.
And I have this weird sweet spot for any game where the theme is like serving customers food or drink. And so love that, like Grand Austria Hotel. And then of course, Taverns of Tiefenthal. Like you describing, I was like, I haven't played this in a while.
It's like being a good host. It's being a good host. Yeah.
And then I was like, give people some beer and they give me money. It's great,
And you cut out all the real life stuff like getting a loan, and, finding a good location,
dealing with the drunks and stuff,
going underwater in the first like 6 months. Yeah, that's right.
So we'll move on to our first topic. So I think we'll start off with our topic. Stu, can you describe again?
Sure. Again, found out Tiffany is a huge movie fan and you work in the movie industry. And then so we're like, hey, let's talk about actually some board games that are clearly like would either remind you of a specific movie or a movie genre or something like that. So I just recommend a few that we like. So I'll go first. So some of these are going to be kind of tricky because it's like, well, is the source material really the book? Some of these were books first,
Right.
but I'll start with one.
The movie feel.
Yeah, it gives you a movie feel.
Right.
So one of the ones, Christina and I were brainstorming our list, and then one of the ones she mentioned was a game called Nemesis. So the movie tie-in here would be the movie Alien, and the game is Nemesis. So, and then basically you're a crew, you're on the spaceship, you're trying to get to a destination, and then aliens are showing up on board. And the aliens, if you look at these things, the actual
Crazy
miniatures,
powerful.
they look like aliens from the Alien movie franchise. But basically, they're kind of tracking you around. You might split up to take care of different tasks. One of you may be a traitor who's kind of like, okay, I'm actually going to switch destination. They have their own selfish objective, and you're not sure who that is, if that person is even doing that in the game and such. But so it raises the tension because it's not just the aliens. You don't know if someone's going to backstab you. So this is similar again to the Alien movies. There's always inevitably one person who's like going to sabotage everything, or they're super selfish and they're going to get everyone else killed because they're just looking out for themselves and things like that. Or it could be like the androids in the android in the first Alien movie. So it definitely has that vibe of you're creeping through these different areas of the ships. You don't know if you open a door, an alien's going to pop out at you and you're going to have to deal with that. You're not necessarily like fully loaded with these awesome machine guns or laser guns or anything like that. And you just have to survive. So it's a really epic game. I love Nemesis, but it's also, there are a lot of little rules. Like every time I play, I'm like, okay, what do we do here? What do we do? Checking back to the rule book. So there's a lot of that going on, but otherwise thematically, if you like Alien or Aliens, this is a game you should check out. It's a hefty one. It's a longer game, but it's pretty cool. All right.
Does it? I have a question about
Sure.
it. I've always wanted to play it. Is it like tactical in terms of? Is the rules sort of like line of sight and
Nope.
and? Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. There are a lot of games. Actually, another game I want to mention does have a lot of that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this one does not. It's just like there are a bunch of different rooms. The aliens are either next to you or in the same room as you. There's some dice
And
rolling
it's
there.
scary.
Yeah. But the
Yeah,
main
yeah.
tension comes from, it's not the tactical, like, are we optimizing combat, like line of sight and
Oh, that's
distance to the alien, nothing like that. It's not really combat focused. It's more about
Oh, that's great.
surviving this.
Yeah, it's one I've
situation.
always wanted to play.
Yeah, it's really cool thematically.
I've only played it once. I was happy to play it. Never gonna play it again. It's just not my thing.
Why?
Is it too?
It was just like, that sort of like, it felt incredibly cinematic. So that's why I think it was worth the experience for sure. But I played, I like to pick like a sciencey character, and my sciencey character had these abilities to do certain objectives, but weak AF basically, right? Like if I ran into an alien, I was like dead or maimed, seriously maimed, and that definitely happened. So it felt very realistic. So I just had to really lean into like, can I hide from all of these things and let you guys deal with it? That sort of thing. So it felt very real. And I really sucked at it. So there was that aspect, but I think it was very, very like what I would expect from if I had to live in an alien movie. Like I'd be dead for sure. Like I'm not winning, but like this is what I would be trying to do to survive. And everybody had their own little objectives and trying to find a way to figure out like, you're trying to go home, but I think you're trying not to, and I need to stop you from doing this objective. There's a lot of that, and it was like a really great experience, but it's just not my type of game that I play a lot of. So,
How about you, Tiffany? You made a list of, you showed us your list of ideas for this segment.
So the one we talked about that kind of just popped out immediately was, and I thought of it more recently because it's been pretty popular. Came out very recently, I think in 2018, called Obsession.
I love that game. Obsessed.
I love it too. Yeah, and it's I think you can play it online now on Board Game Arena, which is great. There's an expansion that's coming out later this year that I saw at PAX Unplugged last December that looks great. Just more stuff. And the movie, I think when people play that game and think of it, I think people think of a lot of popular TV shows, but there's a movie I think that would probably be like the origin story for it. And it came out in 2001. It's called Gosford Park. And it was a Robert Altman movie, and it was set in the 30s, and it was just a group of, wealthy celebrity, pretentious, snobby people that get together at this big estate, just to be rich, basically, at this big estate. There's a hunting party. Everything's very decadent. It's just very conspicuous consumption. But it also shows the staff behind the scenes and some of their storylines, and then how some of those storylines kind of overlap with, you don't just see them behind the scenes, you see them and they're like kind of the things they're trying to go through, and then how they're treated by these people. And it was written, so I think it won an Oscar, now got nominated for a bunch. It was written by a guy named Julian Fellows, who then went on to create the television show Downton Abbey. And I think a lot of people, when they think of Obsession, think of Downton Abbey, the board game. That's what they think of it. And the game's great. It's you're not the point of view is not that of the servants, although there's servants in the game. It's like figures heavily. It's almost more of a Downton Abbey setup, even though it's kind of like Gosford Park adjacent, in that you are a estate that has kind of lost its kind of luster. You don't have the prestige that your family name used to have, and so you want to build that back up in society. And the way you do that is you throw parties and you attract very important people and very famous people and very rich people to your events, so that you can curry favor with them and then start upgrading your estate bit by bit. And so you're literally just adding elements. We're gonna have a croquet lawn party, and I'm going to invite these people. And it kind of is adjacent to Taverns in that it's a mini deck management thing, because you're building your deck as you go. You start out with the family cards, and every card has a requirement of who they need to serve them. And there's different servants. So it's not just like, a butler and a maid. There's a butler, there's a maid, there's,
Footmen and stuff.
And some of the events, they tell you very specifically what you need. They're almost like recipes, the events. It's like, okay, this one is they're all playing cards in the game room. It's four men have to be here. So they do gender it. It's always like male or female. And so you need to have the certain guests to meet the requirement to throw an event there. And you need to have the servants that they require. And sometimes a servant will just be helping everyone, and sometimes somebody will be like, I need my own servant. And some of the VIPs are like, I need these two servants. And so a lot of that is managing the resources and the actions you're taking with these workers, because once you use a servant, they kind of time out, and then it takes a couple of turns before you can use them again. So you have to sort of program a little ahead of like being as efficient as possible. And different things that you throw give you different things. Like some events are just to raise money. Some events are to get prestige, which is, another way you want to win and trigger the end game. And all of this is to try to woo like this one power family in the area.
Fairchilds.
The Fairchilds that you want to, you want a Fairchild to marry into your family, because then you're set for life, right? And so over a series of turns, at like every fourth turn, you're trying to woo them and have them come to your event. And if you do that, then they're hanging out with you for that next 4 turns. And they're very powerful.
Huge. And that part's very like Jane Austen-y to me too, right? Like a lot of Jane Austen.
Well, and what's cool about it is kind of like these Jane Austen, and it's kind of like this movie and these programs. Gilded Age is another program that's similar. There are people that are just awful people. And they provide benefits, but they're awful. So a lot of the characters are
American
like,
heiresses, totally.
Right. This will give you some prestige and some money, but you'll lose like a whole bunch of victory points at the end of the game if you still have this person in your deck, because they're awful. Like nobody wants to talk to this person. It's like a necessary evil. So it's really fun. And the artwork is they just use actual archival photos of people from that era on the cards. And so
I love that each card has the little flavor text about that guest. So like I like to read it. You totally play the game and not read it at all, but I love the little flavor, like, oh, this person loves to talk about themselves too much or something,
Yeah, and the movie Gosford Park that I kind of brought up that kind of remind me of it. The only element that's different is it's the same vibe as Obsession, except in Gosford Park, what happens is there's a murder. And so they don't know who did it. And of course, it might be somebody there and everybody there is. It's almost like Knives Out before Knives Out a little bit. But anyway, that was a game that I thought of immediately when we were talking about this topic.
I love that game, and how host had a little like tea party game day with that, so to sort of pair it once, which is fun.
I will say it's very mean. That's the only thing going in. It's extremely cruel. Like it's very unforgiving in terms of people will just definitely do things that absolutely sabotage your plans.
Yeah, you can actually send some of your servants to start rumors about other people and ruin their reputation for a while. So,
You can steal help from other people. Yeah, it's very backstabby.
Completely different tack. Let's see, another genre that some games have. Like I was thinking, like Frankenstein movies and stuff like that too. There have been quite a few really interesting games that have that sort of very gothic, based on Frankenstein's, theme. And I was thinking about Abomination that was put out a few years ago, and I like to play that like every Halloween or so. It's pretty macabre.
Is the full title Abomination: The Heir of Frankenstein?
Not the
or am
heir. I don't. It's something.
Yeah,
you'll look it up. But it's Abomination. Something. I think, and it is in some ways a very straightforward worker placement. But you are being tasked by Frankenstein's creature, they never really say this, but it's probably Frankenstein's monster, to try to build him a companion, essentially.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the worker placement, your goal is to accumulate the body parts necessary and the skills in order to bring different parts of this new creature alive. And a lot of times you're like digging through the graveyard or stealing some cadavers and things like that. So really dark, macabre humor. And I love this game, especially around Halloween. So it gives me all the Frankenstein vibes.
Yeah, it is, by the way, Abomination, the Heir of Frankenstein.
Okay. Good
So
memory.
it does have Frankenstein in the name. But on the board, on your player boards, you actually see cadavers. And then you're seeing like them, like as you're building the body and everything, you're adding different parts to it. So it's really cool to look at, and just thematically, whenever I think of like a really awesome theme for a game, this is always up there on any list. So that's a good one.
And then you played My Father's Work too, right?
Yeah, that's another kind of Frankenstein-y influenced game. So My Father's Work. This is a heavier strategy game. So real quick, it's a worker placement game. But part of the appeal of My Father's Work is you're creating different science projects that you're trying to complete different projects throughout in your lab, but you have to deal with the townspeople. So like you could do things that would kind of like, hey, the townspeople will like dislike you more or be more paranoid about what you're doing, and that's going to impact things. Or you can curry favor with the townspeople. And it's been a while since I played it, so I don't remember exactly, but decisions you make have like they can affect the game and impact the game on a greater level that affects everyone. There's sometimes you might have to vote on something. Everyone's deciding about what's happening in town. Even like outside actions, like I think the one scenario I played, the military was coming into town, and then or a militia, something like that. And then you had to kind of like figure out how you want to deal with all of this stuff that's going on outside of just what's happening in your home. So that's a really neat one.
We had that, and we found it a new home. We thought it was, what I loved about it and what surprised me about, I'm talking about My Father's Work, is it's a really tough and challenging optimization, like resource optimization game underneath it. And then there's all this other stuff that happens. So there's a lot of short term to get to, finish a round, but then there's long-term stuff where you want to build something that's going to take you several rounds. And a lot of the game is like grabbing different resources that you need to complete these cards on in front of you so that you can get stuff. The thing that kind of fell short for us was the storytelling part, which is app driven. So you had to download an app, and then it was very choose your own adventure. And the way they were kind of talking about it before it came out was, kind of what you'd said, Shu, is your decisions will affect the game if you, almost like the ethics of it, right? Oh, I'm really leaning into like stealing cadavers and stuff. So now the townspeople are really giving me a hard time. But we were noticing some of the things it did. Also, it's not just, I feel like Abomination's slightly stronger because this is your grandfather or your family legacy are all mad scientists. So it isn't just Frankenstein. They introduce a whole bunch of mad scientists projects, and they kind of riff on some that aren't Frankenstein. So like Jekyll and Hyde, and other ones that are out there, and I felt like it was it was almost like it was like everything core. It was like, even if it wasn't, even if it, and again, it's not trying to be historically realistic, but like, even if it was like, oh, this book came out here, this book came out, this book's younger than that book, like these characters didn't overlap. And yet in this, it's like Penny Dreadful. They're all in this game. But some of the story stuff, it felt very like there wasn't much to it. Like it was almost like I would just play the resource optimization thing,
right,
and I wouldn't necessarily stop everything to listen. Yeah, and a lot of it is private, which I don't like about the app-driven games is, oh, I'll be right with you guys. I'm just going to look at what it's telling me, and I can't tell you guys what it is. And then a lot of the stuff in it, we were finding out were just catch-up mechanics. So I was getting smoked in a game, and then the app had me look at something, and then it said, okay, when the other person reaches this many points, give them this prompt, and the prompt was like, you lose 10 points. So I was just like, like, I don't know. I in a way, it almost felt like the story thing was Frankenstein onto the game. Yeah. So, but I really like Abomination a whole lot better. And the other thing that's fun about that game is the conversations you have. If somebody has no idea what the context is, they're horrified the way that you're talking about Abomination while you're playing it.
It is.
You're like, oh, I didn't get that leg, and oh my god, how am I gonna? If I sneak into the cemetery again, I'm gonna, like, and there are people like, what are you talking about?
Just bones here.
Should I call the police? It's like.
Well, we're still talking about Frankenstein. I did just play the Mother of Frankenstein, a trilogy of narrative puzzle games. So it was very fascinating because it's definitely not based off of Frankenstein the movie, but it's focused on Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, who actually was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, a very famous feminist. It's sort of structured in a lot of letters from Mary Shelley to her son, and then there's all of these interesting puzzles along the way, like an escape room, but in a box, basically. And there's an overarching story to all three of them. So if you want narrative, this is has been a really interesting game for me. And I was like, the more I think back to how the narrative tied together, the more interesting it was. Like, some of the puzzles got a little bit samey, I would say, but the narrative part was very strong. So one more thing, that's all.
Sounds like we could have done an entire topic just on
Frankenstein maybe.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
You just table that for Halloween and do Monster Mash. Yeah.
All right, so moving on. So real quick, another game recently brought to my attention was Dust Biters. My friend Nick said he actually was like, he asked me, I was at his place hanging out, and he goes, have you played Dust Biters? And I'm like, no, I don't even know what that is. He's like, what? And he was so incredulous. And I was like, after he explained it, and I was like, oh wait, I have heard of this game, but I've never played it. It's a 2-player game, and the movie influence here is Mad Max. You're in a post-apocalyptic world. The entire game is just one convoy of cars, and some and they're represented by cards on a table. So you just literally have a row of cards. Some are going to be pushed a little towards my opponent. Those belong to Nick in this case, and then the other cards that are closer to me are my cards. So Nick and I are going head to head, and basically at the end of every round, the last car in a convoy automatically gets this card. You want to be the last one left. So you're doing all these things to try to like destroy other cards. So it's as you start playing it, it just so much reminds you of Mad Max, because there are these cards that are like, one card might have a sniper in it, and it could snipe another card in this convoy. There's a card called Scorchy. It always destroys the card behind it because it's someone on a flamethrower. So when you see the artwork and you see all these cards lined up, it does have very much. Some people are on motorcycles, some are doing these stunts, and then you're just trying to position cards to not be the last one, or getting these attack cards into the right cards in the right place to attack other cards. So you're like doing all this little simple, clever maneuvering of like moving things around in order. So maybe I want to have one card that's going to help push Scorchy up to the front to destroy Nick's card that's now right behind it, and things like that. So it's very simple, almost like chess-like in that way, but much simpler and thematically like right on brand for something like Mad Max. And that's called Dust Biters.
I've never heard of that one. That sounds really cool. Scorchy sounds like kind of a cute sidekick name, though, from a Pixar movie.
Yeah, it totally
Except
does.
this one
Like,
with a
okay,
flamethrower.
Scorchy,
Yeah.
I'm gonna burn you up.
Yeah.
There's a game that's Mad Max adjacent I was thinking of too. I don't know if you guys have played Wasteland Delivery Service.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And that kind of reminds me of, in the franchise, there's one of the movies is Beyond Thunderdome. And this is the one that Tina
I
Turner's
recently
in.
rewatched that just a week ago.
Yeah, holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
And she runs Bartertown, and so I feel like it's not so much the Mad Max Fury Road stuff, running around mayhem. There is a little bit of that, but it's mostly pick up and deliver in a post-apocalyptic desert landscape. So it kind of reminds me of what that world would be like, the Mad Max world, but not the parts where people are just running and trying to murder each other in their cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then you had other good picks. What's another one of yours, Tiffany?
Yeah, so I narrowed it down to this one, and this is because it's meta and it's very movie, and I can name so many movies that inspire it. Something that's very popular in film is films about film, like a movie about making a movie. And a lot of times it sounds like, somebody kind of, snake eating its own tail, or they can be self-indulgent sometimes because it's a director and a writer that is writing about that experience. And sometimes they come off as, oh, everything I do is interesting, including making a movie. Let's make a movie about it. And so sometimes they're not successful, or they might feel like a little too like, oh, you would only know this if you worked on a movie, you would get it. But I do think there's a lot of good ones. So the game that I'm thinking of, which I love, and as somebody who worked in film, it really does capture it. It's called Roll Camera, ROLL. And it's Roll Camera, the filmmaking board game. It came out a few years ago, I think 2021. Malachi Ray Rempin, he's an illustrator and a game designer. And so he does all the artwork for it. And it's really cute artwork. It's a cooperative game where you're a movie production company that's kind of in trouble financially, and you need to finish a movie, and it needs to be a big hit for you to keep going, or else you're going to have to shutter the production company. And there's different aspects to the game. There's some, it's hard to describe. There's different modules on the table that you have to manage, but you're all doing it collectively. So you have a hand of cards, and you're trying to, and it's every aspect of the filmmaking process. It's developing a script. It's then filming the scenes you need based on what the script is telling you to film, and then it is everybody is a different person on set. So there's a director, there's a cinematographer, there's a production designer, there's a producer, and they all have different abilities and different strengths, variable player powers. And one of the things that's really neat is the filmmaking part is kind of this geometric, like Tetris piece puzzle in the center of the board, where it's just a grid, and certain cards that you play that are they're script cards. So it's like you're trying to build a sequence, and the sequence requires certain things that have to be included in the Tetris pieces you place. And sometimes it's the icons on them, and sometimes it's the, where they are in proximity to each other. And you need to do this, efficiently. If it takes you too long to build a scene, then it's taking you too long to film the movie, and then you go over budget. So there's a lot of little, things that it does. And again, like a lot of co-ops, there's complications that kind of randomly come up. So there's some cards that come up, and there's always 3 complications that kind of slide over. So if you don't deal with them, they get more chaotic, and they get more, you start getting penalized for not dealing with them. And then there's even an action you can take where you call a production meeting. And so everybody gets together, and that's when you can share cards. So it's so neat that all the little aspects of it are actually thematically tied into what you might be doing, when you're making a movie. And the cute thing is when you complete a movie, it's just like a whole sequence of cards. And there's like kind of sentences you can actually like kind of, it tells a story. And it'll even like, and it'll even say what kind of genre you want. Like, so the scripts you're developing are like, okay, this is a horror movie, this is a romance. And then sometimes they have you combine 2 things. It's like a romantic comedy or a horror comedy or an action sci-fi, it's just a lot of fun. And the artwork, like I said, the artwork is very great. It's all this kind of cartoony stuff. But anyway, if you're looking for movies about movie making, here's a few that are kind of pretty well known. I think most of them are. 8.5 is a Fellini movie that came out in the 60s. Day for Night is a Francois Truffaut movie that came out in early 70s. And again, both of those movies are about a director making a movie that's completely out of control. Usually in this genre of film, the movie's completely out of control. Ed Wood is famous. Johnny Depp playing Ed Wood, who is famously known as the worst director of all time, has made what some people agree to be the worst movie of all time, Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Right.
There's Scream 3 is cool because that's when they make a movie based on Scream. And it's a sequel. It's Stab 3, and a lot of the scenes in Scream 3 take place on the Hollywood lot in a set that looks exactly like Neve Campbell's house. So it's very meta because she's getting chased through the house movie set in Hollywood in Scream 3 like she was in Scream 1. And there's another one it might be people don't not know much about, is called Living in Oblivion. Came out in the mid 90s. That's probably the best movie about making movies, but it's about an independent movie that's just totally gone wrong. I believe Peter Dinklage is in it. Also, Steve Buscemi is the director. That one is pretty easy to find. It's just not a lot of people have seen it. I would suggest that movie is just a fun one that people may not have seen.
Cool. Thanks. Encyclopedia here. That's like movies, which is amazing. So we are actually running up on the edge of our podcast time because we love talking to you. And I think we still have movies to talk about. And while Tiffany is here, I want to take advantage of this encyclopedia of movie knowledge. So maybe we'll finish up with this topic, maybe a few more picks, and then hopefully we can save the toy factor topic for a future podcast and have you back on.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry if I go long. You can take me out of the video store, but you can't take the video store out.
Yeah.
So.
Christina, do you have another quick game pick for the movies?
I think, there are a lot of movies. I guess I don't have and maybe Tiffany will have some specific ones, but whenever I play Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is, worker placement, plus sort of exploring, deck building type game, about exploring an island and looking for artifacts and finding this lost temple. I think of a lot of Indiana Jones type archaeology movies and stuff. So I feel like a bit of an adventurer as I'm going to these new sites. I have to plan accordingly so that I can, go farther and farther into the jungle, and finding these artifacts inside will get me closer and closer to finding the ultimate temple that we're trying to discover. So although it's a very sort of worker placement-y game, I really enjoy the overarching theme. And so that gives me some feels of cinema in some ways. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Tiffany? Another quick hit.
Okay. I think I'm going to go with a favorite, the popular one. It's very obvious. King of Tokyo.
Oh, yes.
Especially given the Godzilla love that, got the Oscar-winning Godzilla love from Godzilla -1. If anyone hasn't seen that movie, it's very good. Mm-hmm. And Richard Garfield designed this game, which he could have just designed Magic the Gathering and spent the rest of his life just spending that money, but instead he's gone on to make some really terrific games beyond that. And King of Tokyo is really great. It's sort of his version of Yahtzee. And it's Yahtzee where it has variable player powers and upgrades, which makes it a lot more interesting, I think. And you all play big, oversized monsters stomping around Tokyo, and it's King of the Mountain. You want to be the last monster standing. And of course, there's one that's very Godzilla adjacent, but there's a bunch of other ones. There's huge robots. And so, Pacific Rim and Godzilla and all these kind of BattleTech, all these kind of genres of games and movies that have come out. It reminds me of it. And that game's readily available online. I think we play it a lot on Board Game Arena. I think there's a co-op version of it, which might be King of Tokyo Mountain or King of Tokyo
King
Island.
of Monster Island.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
we talked about that in the show. That one is actually there. Because King of Tokyo is really light and family friendly. I think King of Monster Island actually gets a little bit. They add more rules. It's more gamery, but it's really good on its.
And it's cooperative. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a boss monster that all the normal monsters. So we're still monsters, but now there's a bigger creature that we're all now fighting against. So
yeah, and that's
it's really good.
Very
That's
thematic.
like some of these King Kong versus Godzilla movies that are coming out where they have to team up to beat the big boss and stuff. And
Yeah.
I think I like Godzilla -1 because it got back to Godzilla being scary and not friendly. And not even like he's not taking it personally against people. He's just not going to be the cuddly guy that's going to protect humans on Earth. Which why would he?
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, a couple more quick hits from me. I mentioned earlier there's another Aliens game, Level 7 Omega Protocol. So there's a bunch of, I think there are 3 different Level 7 games, but Omega Protocol, I believe most people generally consider the best one. But it's everyone versus one player. So the one player is controlling. Basically, the setup is it's like an Area 51 sort of installation where these creatures are kind of getting loose. There's a bunch of different missions. So the players, the group of players, they're kind of like this Marine squad. They have different characters. They're going in, and this one is what you're just asking about, Tiffany, about Nemesis, which is line of sight, distance, and you're fighting. You're shooting things. You have to get you fight on a tactical level. But the overseer, the guy who's controlling, the person who's controlling all the aliens, has all these powers, like maybe they'll cause a cave-in or a collapse or malfunction here, so they have all these powers as well. That one's really cool if you like the Aliens vibe. The second game, more of the there's a Marine squad versus just you alone with aliens. Then there's the last one I want to mention is Starship Captains. This is if you like Star Trek at all, go check this game out. It's a worker placement game. It's not the most complex or unique game in the world, but it's very much a lot of Star Trek vibes, from like teleporting people down, visiting different planets, and things like that. So check that one out, Starship Captains.
Oh, cool.
And then you have any?
I think in general, just like that sort of narrative feel that I love from a movie, I've really liked a lot of the Crossroads games. We've talked about them a bunch, but depending on the theme, there's the Dangerous Waters. Was it
Forgotten Waters?
Forgotten Waters. I always miss the first word. Forgotten Waters, to play like ridiculous, crazy pirates going on these pirate adventures. Very much, Pirates of Caribbean sort of vibe, and then their more recent one, Freelancers, was about I think it's a little bit more D&D-ish or whatever, which was recently a very fun movie also. But you're playing these ridiculous creatures in this world where you're going on these adventures as mercenaries, and all of these crazy fantasy things happen to you in this world. But since there's great voice acting through the app, you're playing these people where you have your own story that progresses as you go through each time you play. It changes every single time, and I love the crazy events that happen in these games that can come back and get you too. So Crossroads games I really enjoy for that cinematic feel.
Any last ones you want to quickly mention, Tiffany?
One more. Just Lacrimosa came out in 2022, and if you are a Amadeus fan, which came out in 1984, I highly recommend it, because it actually is set after he has passed away, and what you're doing is trying to fund his work and help finish his Requiem, which he died writing. And it also is, so in the present, you're trying to make that happen and stage it. But in the past, you're also kind of collecting stories about him for his memoirs to keep his name. And so it's a very complicated Euro that you really can't discuss in short form, but it very much feels like it's a love letter to Amadeus, and having the music on when you play it, or having, it makes you want to watch the movie again. It's very fun.
I had to buy an actual tuning fork as the first player marker for that. I was like, it just needs it.
There's a lot of really, and I love at the bottom. So real quick, at the bottom of the board, there's blank sheet music. And then what you're doing is you're trying to place your player note, your color notes places. And at the end of the game, it looks like a little piece of music. I don't think it's playable, but it looks really, really cool on the board after you're done with the game.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tiffany. We just had so much to talk about, but I had a great time doing it. And so where can people follow you and find out what you're up to and what you're writing?
I am mostly on, in this new fractured social media life that we're all in. I think Blue Sky is the best place to find me, and that's tiffanyleigh.bsky.social. I'm on there a lot. There's a pretty good board game community over there, starting to grow. And it's fun to be over there talking about it because it's not crickets. That's probably the best place to find me. I have a live show in the city that I'm trying to bring back. It's been on hiatus since the pandemic. It's like Quiplash. It's like that Jackbox game. It's Quiplash crossed with Match Game, and it's called Game of Blanks. And that's just something that I'll be hopefully producing somewhere live in a venue in New York City sometime this year. Yeah. But I mean, if you find me on Blue Sky, there's a link to all my other stuff. But social media is so weird right now, and I just think finding me there is probably the best way to find me anywhere.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for listening, best board game friends, and big thanks to our editor, Mike Zipkin. If you like our podcast, please take the time to leave us a podcast review to help others find our show. So now you can stop listening and go play a game. Bye.
Bye.